I mean, that over time is going to accumulate in the genetic pool and cause us to literally go extinct.
Oh no, it's him again. Matt Powell.
Official.
Hi, that's right, Matt Powell is back, this time with an idea about genetic entropy and his belief that it's going to cause the human race to go extinct over some period of time. He's called out Aaron Ra, Bill Nye and Richard Dawkins. The problem is, Matt, it's the equivalent of being able to design one of these and expecting the designers of these to turn up to a debate with you on the finer points of aerodynamics and Formula One car design.
It's not going to happen.
So I guess we better carry on. Get on with it, Matt, and
Roll V2.
So from generation to generation, as we accumulate genetic mutations, we actually accumulate 1 to 200 genetic mutations, or what's known as neutral mutations, per person per generation.
Okay, we'll go with that, Matt. 1 to 200 neutral mutations per generation, although it would have been nice to have a source.
And so what that means is that our offspring will have 1 to 200 typographical errors that we did not have in our genetics.
Can anyone see where this is going to go? Matt, typographical error, think of it as a typographical difference.
And so population geneticists have all come to the conclusion.
Really? All of them?
And so population geneticists have all come to the conclusion that our genetics are actually deteriorating as we move on and as time progresses.
Well, I think it's best to check with one. Are our genetics deteriorating over time?
No, I can't tell. I do like fluffy kittens though.
As we reproduce, our genetics become worse over time as a population.
No, Matt, they don't get worse over time, they change over time.
And so genetic entropy is something that evolutionists and atheists will often mock and say that it's a ridiculous idea that our genes could be deteriorating.
What a ridiculous idea that our genes can be Oh.
But I'm sorry, if you have 1 to 200 typographical errors per person per generation, I mean, that over time is going to accumulate in the genetic pool and cause us to literally go extinct.
Matt, we're not accumulating 200 errors with each generation. Now, these mutations can be one of 3 forms, Matt. They can be advantageous, neutral, or deleterious. If they're really bad, then perhaps the child won't be born, or they won't reach childbearing age, in which case the fact they had that mutation won't matter, because they've not passed it on. If they do have children, then that same mutation could revert. It could mutate back to how it was before, or it could mutate differently. You seem to be under the impression that once a mutation occurs, it's there forever in every descendant. That's not the case.
Population geneticists know that these errors that are accumulating will have some effect, even if that effect is vanishingly small.
Good to know, Matt. You accept evolution. Now, any mutations don't make any difference until and unless they are selected upon. Now, here is a man with a mutation, or error, as you like to call it. It's Mr. Namgyal Wangdi. He suffers from thin blood, with less hemoglobin and a reduced capacity for oxygen. Although, if he lived where I lived, or where you lived, that probably wouldn't make any difference. But it's not just Mr. Wangdi who has this mutation. His family has it. In fact, his whole community has it. His community have lived in an area for around 6,000 years, and this mutation has been found to be beneficial for them. You may better know Mr. Wangdi as Sherpa Tenzing Norgay. He and Edmund Hillary conquered Everest in 1953. The mutation that the Sherpa people have has enabled evolution by natural selection. They are the fittest for their environment, high altitude.
So all mutations, all errors in the human genome must have some effect on fitness.
It depends on the location. The mutation the Sherpa people have is advantageous in the environment that they're in. If one of their children has another mutation which switches that one off, then they are likely to be selected against by nature because they would be less fit for the environment.
And so, in 2003, the Human Genome Project was completed, and they found as well that we lose 1 to 2% of our genetic information as human beings per generation.
Matt, unless you can provide a citation for that, I call bullshit, because I've not been able to find any record of that. And anyway, you do realise that Neanderthals went extinct around 40 to 44,000 years ago, and yet we share 99.7% of the same genetic material.
So our offspring is losing genetic information as time moves on.
No.
Mutations are accumulating in the genetic code.
No.
And this is causing us to go extinct as a population.
Don't panic! Don't panic! Right, don't panic, you're all right.
Oh, I don't think we need to panic right now about going extinct due to our genetics, Matt.
There are scientific papers that have been written about why we should have been extinct 100 times over, if evolution were even true.
Really? I'd like a source for those, please. And you've already accepted that evolution is true. You have admitted that nature can select against deleterious mutations, and therefore it can promote advantageous ones. That is evolution.
And so, the way that evolutionists try to rescue this is by invoking natural selection.
You cannot have it both ways, Matt. Your whole argument is based on mutations building up so that we go extinct, i.e. the natural environment selects against us. Survival of the fittest by natural selection is evolution.
But the problem is that natural selection cannot detect neutral mutations. So these 100 to 200 typographical errors in our bodies that get passed on from generation to generation cannot be detected by natural selection and therefore cannot be weeded out.
I throw your argument back at you, Matt. These neutral mutations are just that, neutral. They do no harm. In fact, somewhat less than 10% of our DNA is active.
Natural selection only selects and removes the genes that are most deleterious, or the mutations that are the most deleterious. It might enhance your best beneficial mutation and might remove the worst deleterious mutation, but the neutral mutations are completely invisible to natural selection. Selection cannot act upon them.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner. I think you get it, Matt. The deleterious ones get weeded out. The advantageous ones survive. Neutral ones make no difference. You have just described evolution by natural selection.
Thank you.
And so natural selection has its limits. And so for evolutionists to claim that natural selection is what's causing us to select beneficial mutations, and those beneficial mutations make us better over time.
It's not better or worse, Matt. It's more suited to the environment you're in. So with those Sherpas, they are more suited to high altitude living than you or I.
Well, even if that were the case, we're still getting 1 to 200 neutral mutations or typographical errors in our genetics that are building up along with those beneficial mutations, even if you were to grant their argument. And so errors over time will cause death.
The whole thing is self-correcting, Matt. Any deleterious mutation you have, if it's one that's going to kill you, will either kill you before or after you have children. If it's after you have children, then we're not going to go extinct. If it kills you before you have children, you've not passed on the mutation. Here are two children that have Hutchinson-Gilford progeria, rapid aging genetic mutation. The thing is, Matt, they're likely to die, on average, age 13. So this genetic mutation is not passed on. It's just one that occurs spontaneously in about 1 in 18 million people.
So for evolutionists to claim that natural selection is going to preserve us as a population, when natural selection cannot even detect these deleterious mutations that are getting added to the genetic pool.
Matt, you're dancing around it, aren't you? If they can't be detected, they're not deleterious.
It just goes to show that this crowd, these YouTube atheists, are the most scientifically illiterate people that exist. And just the fact that they could believe in Big Bang cosmology or that pond scum turned to human over time.
Apparently not all pond scum does evolve into humans.
Or fish turned to fishermen over time, or bacteria to biologists. This proves that these people cannot be trusted.
So apparently they can't be trusted because they accept that every single piece of evidence we have points to the theory of evolution being correct.
Because people that actually use free thought and that can do scientific empirical methods will not come to such ridiculous conclusions that the world popped into existence from nothing with no cause associated with it.
Firstly, Matt, nobody is claiming the universe popped into existence, caused or otherwise. And what the hell's that got to do with genetic evolution anyway?
I mean, folks, this stuff is absolutely pathetic on absolutely every level.
Really, Matt? So you're just going to hand wave away biology, virology, microbiology, and, well, in fact, every single science. If it doesn't directly evidence evolution, they're consistent with it. Every single one.
And as creationists, we should constantly be calling them out. And one of the favorite talking points that I've found that are out there on our side is that we gain these genetic mutations and that they cannot be weeded out by natural selection. That is proof positive that we started out perfect as a genetic species and then we became worse over time.
No. No. Every single species is perfectly suited for its environment. When the environment changes, then those members of that species most suited are the ones most likely to survive. And then that species will again be perfectly suited for the environment it's in.
Not a single cell becoming better over time, but the human population being created perfectly in the beginning and then becoming worse over time.
Yeah, well, actually, you could well be evidence for that, Matt.
And so even if we granted evolution to be true, if there was a single-celled organism at the beginning, which all life descended from, that single-celled organism would have just reproduced worse copies of itself, and it would have died out as it accumulated mutations. And so natural selection only selects information that exists. It doesn't create new information, it simply selects, hence the name natural selection. So,
well, let's take an example, Matt. Yourself. Let's just posit that you have a genetic mutation. Call it the Dunning-Kruger mutation. Now, if this is a nasty mutation which gets selected against and you die out before you have children, so has the mutation. It's gone. The rest of us are fine. Perhaps the mutation doesn't stop you from having children, but you can't have many, in which case that mutation doesn't spread very far. Or if it's a little bit worse, perhaps you can't replace the population of Powells and gradually you die out. Again, the rest of us are fine. Perhaps, though, your Dunning-Kruger doesn't prevent you from having children, and you pass on those genes, and they're not prevented from having children either. Then Dunning-Kruger gradually spreads throughout the population, which many may say is a bad thing, although it would give me lots of material for future videos.
think about it. Nobody would ever go to a copying machine and say that the copy is better than the original. But according to evolution, the copy, yeah, that's way better than the original.
Matt, that is just a ridiculous straw man. Let's say I had a son. He's basically the same as me. He might be a little taller, a little shorter, maybe have a little more hair, who knows. Basically, he'll be the same. Now let's just say he happens to have a mutation, the same one as our Sherpa friends do in Nepal. Then if we wanted to climb Everest, he would be better suited to that than I. Not better, just better suited. That's all it is. So your video was calling out Aaron Ra, Bill Nye and Richard Dawkins. Well, I'd like to help. Perhaps you should work your way towards them. I'd like to put myself forward. Would you like to have a debate? Contact me at this email address. I'm looking forward to hearing from you, Matt. Until next time, stay sensible.
Hey, shut up and sit down.